Lecture 28, Discovering the Root Metaphors of an Organization, Part 1. This is the 28th lecture of the leadership course. The theme of this lecture is metaphorical thinking. Metaphors are hidden comparisons, and metaphorical thinking can be described as thinking in comparisons. Metaphorical thinking is the fourth mode of deep thinking that we have discussed, and it differs from the first three modes, decision-making thinking, systems thinking, and integrative thinking, in a significant way. Where does it differ? The first three modes of deep thinking are not commonly used by most people, and even if they are taught, they are difficult to learn. However, metaphorical thinking is different. Everyone uses metaphorical thinking as a way of thinking. You may wonder, if everyone is already using it, why do I need to talk about it specifically? I will give you three reasons. The first reason is that although everyone is using it, most people are not aware that they are using it. They use it unconsciously. The second reason is that most people do not use it well. They use it passively. In reality, it is not them using metaphors, but rather metaphors using them. The third reason is that metaphorical thinking is essential, and an outstanding leader must learn to use it. There is a revolutionary academic masterpiece co-authored by a linguist and a philosopher called Metaphors We Live By. They argue that we rely on metaphors to survive. If we extend this idea, we rely on metaphors to manage, and we rely on metaphors to lead. 1. Root metaphor. I will give you an example of how we rely on metaphors to educate children. But before that, I need to explain an important concept, root metaphor. Root refers to the root of a tree, and root metaphor is the metaphor at the root of something. Before discussing root metaphor, I need to briefly explain metaphor. As I mentioned earlier, a metaphor is a hidden comparison. It is a way of understanding one thing in terms of another, usually using more vivid and familiar things to help us understand more abstract and unfamiliar things. For example, passion is like fire, is a metaphor, using the image of fire to help us understand the abstract concept of passion. Metaphor is a fundamental way for humans to understand things. Metaphors are sometimes obvious, and sometimes not so obvious. Consider these three statements. The first statement is, my passion is like a fire. The second statement is, my passion is a fire. Now listen to the third statement, my passion is burning brightly. All three statements are metaphors, and they are all the same metaphor, but each one is less obvious than the previous one. In the last two statements, the metaphor is hidden and becomes a root metaphor. During the Enlightenment period, there was a French philosopher named Condillac. He said, at the origin of language, almost every word was a metaphor, and every phrase was a hidden comparison. This statement is not an exaggeration. For example, consider these words, hilltop, foothill, and hillside. These are common words we use, and they are all metaphors. Moreover, behind these words is the same root metaphor. What is this root metaphor? It is, hill is a person. The hill is a person, so it has a head, feet, and waist. As I mentioned earlier, I want to explain an important concept, root metaphor. Pay attention, hilltop, foothill, and hillside are all extended from the root metaphor, hill is a person, which becomes a root metaphor. If a series of metaphors can be derived from a metaphor, then this metaphor is called a root metaphor. This metaphor is the root, and many metaphors can grow from it. The concept of root metaphor is very important. When you are learning metaphorical thinking, an important task is to discover root metaphors. 2. Discovering root metaphors. Let me give you an example to illustrate the importance of discovering root metaphors. The example is a famous sentence, don't let your children lose at the starting line. This sentence has influenced many parents. Have you ever thought about the logical problem in this sentence? Where is the problem? It lies in its root metaphor. The starting line in this sentence is a metaphor, representing childhood. However, this metaphor is not the root metaphor. What is the root metaphor of this sentence? It is, life is a race. Only with this metaphor can the metaphor, childhood is the starting line, be derived. Therefore, the root metaphor behind the sentence, don't let your children lose at the starting line, is, life is a race, more precisely, life is a sprint. Because only in a sprint, losing at the starting line is fatal. Once you discover this root metaphor, the logical problem in this sentence is exposed. If life is a race, then life should be a marathon, not a sprint. If you think of life as a marathon, you will find that it is not important whether you lose at the starting line, but rather the finish line. If you rephrase the sentence as, don't let your children lose at the finish line, will it have a different impact on parents? However, the root metaphor behind the sentence, don't let your children lose at the finish line, is still, life is a race. You can continue to think, why do I have to compare life to a race? Is there always a winner and a loser in a race? Is life really like that? So, what should life be compared to? This question can only be answered by you. My job is not to tell you what life is, but to help you discover the root metaphor behind this sentence. Then I ask you, is this the root metaphor you want? Are there any other possibilities?